Hello and welcome, everybody. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode of the Backwards K Baseball Podcast. My name is Chris Asbrock, and I'm your host tonight. And each and every week, I'm joined by the other guy, Scott Kaiser. Scott, I told you, you weren't his team tonight.
You look like you're stumbling there. I'm like, he's just going to default to what he usually says. He's not going to change it.
No, I wasn't stumbling. I knew.
Yeah.
I knew. Not going to get it by me today.
Well, here we are. Back
19 episodes in, man.
Thanks. Is it? Oh, this is episode 19? That's right.
Episode 19.
I always forget.
Well, you know what I did?
Every time I numbered the episodes at the end of it, I'd just be like, this sounds like the right number.
I actually went to the previous episode and listened to that real quick before we started, so that's all I knew. You can't mess that up. Build off the previous week. I mean, there you go.
I just fly unhinged. It's all good. How you doing, man?
I can't complain. School started now. You know, our boys are back to school. Thank God.
Sweet Jesus, thank God.
Man, I know.
The only bad part about looking forward to the kids going back to school is that it means that, summer's wrapping up. And
I'm okay because I'm not built for the heat.
Well, I just meant in general, the season, not necessarily the heat and everything comes with it, but just,
Fair enough.
The idea of summer and the boys of summer and, the game that we love nearing its close. But today we're going to talk about the fact that there's some teams that are already knocking on the door of going fishing, man. It has been rough for the teams we're going to talk about today. We usually discuss how well teams are doing and the teams that are pushing towards the playoffs. But today we're going to give you a look on the other side of the coin at the teams that have either been eliminated or about to be eliminated or are barreling in that general direction. And we're going to talk about a proposed rule change to Major League Baseball that Chris seems to be in favor of, but I am decidedly against.
Well, let's get into that then. Let's get into it.
No, let's start with talking about the other stuff first and the losers.
Why?
Because I want to get all my venting out of the way because we got to talk Braves and Reds and how disappointing they've been. So I need to get that off my chest. And then we can go into why you're so wrong about the rules.
And then we can fight. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, let's start things off. I'll lead things off this week. Over the White Sox. Over the weekend, the White Sox were eliminated from contention. That's right. The earliest a team has been eliminated from playoff contention during the wild card or division era. There's not much else to say. We've talked a lot about how awful and just an abysmal season this has been for Chicago, the White Sox, and their fans. But this put a whole new spin on it. When I was sitting there Saturday afternoon and got the text that the White Sox had been eliminated, I mean, my first thought was, well, duh, they were eliminated. But my second thought was, wait, really? Like mathematically, they're already eliminated? That seems odd. Like it's just, quick math. But no, the White Sox have been eliminated. They're on pace to lose 123 games. And as I stated there, Chris, this is the earliest this has ever happened. So let's pour one out for the White Sox and their fans. I mean, it's one thing to get eliminated, and it's one thing to have a disappointed. It's another thing to just know, like officially on August, I guess it was August,
like 17th or 18th.
Yes, over the weekend, I would have been the 17th that you're officially eliminated. There's nothing you can do, and that all the games that you play from here on out are just for shits and giggles.
Do you know the worst part is though? We knew that this team was eliminated back in like June, like even May.
Yeah,
and it's just kind of like so. Then you're just waiting to play out the entire rest of the season. I mean, that sucks as a player. You have to dread going in each and every single night to the ballpark, knowing that it's just like, the same crap, different day. But yeah, middle of August, you're already mathematically eliminated. That's impressive. Like that is tip of the cap to the Chicago White Sox. That is impressive. I mean, you are 30-95 And you are what, 39 and a half games out of the wild card. Obviously officially eliminated, but that's unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. And, again, knowing that you were pretty much eliminated, like I said, May, June, that's just,
Well, and
that's tough.
you mentioned the standings, and so that gives me an idea just really quickly to bring up the standings here and look and see who is next in line to get mathematically eliminated from this whole thing. So looking at it from the White Sox side, we look go all the way down. All right, there's the White Sox. So the Athletics and the Angels are both tied with 53 wins apiece, which is insane to think that they both have 23 more wins than the White Sox.
God.
I mean, I know what when you see the pace and obviously usually when they talk about pace, it's teams are on pace to win X amount of games, and early in the year when they start off hot, it's some crazy number, and you're like, well, no team's going to get to 120 some wins, like the pace is going to slow down and whatnot. The White Sox have kept up with their pace. I mean, I'm pretty sure that it's only gotten steadily worse than the thing, and the idea that they have 30 wins in mid-August. Their score differential is negative 258. How did the Braves lose to this team twice? That's sad. Because every time I think about the White Sox, I'm forced to remember that the White Sox played the Braves in a season series earlier back in, I think, at the end of April or beginning of May. The 3-game series, one of the games got rained out. Then the Braves won one and lost one. When the rain game was made up, when the Braves were out on a road trip, they managed to also lose that one. So I don't know how many series that the White Sox have won with their 30 games this season, but I'd venture to guess that the Braves have the distinction of being one of the only teams to lose a series to the White Sox this season, which, just icing on the shit cake that I've been forced to eat all season long in terms of the Braves. And I guess we'll go on ahead and transition into the teams that are on life support, because if the White Sox have been eliminated, they're dead. And we discussed the fact that the A's are nipping at their heels for them getting eliminated, along with the Angels, two of the other worst teams in baseball. Again, still 20-some games better. If you look on the National League side, I guess it's somewhat as bleak. The Rockies and Marlins are close to those numbers as well. 46 wins for each of those teams.
Let's stay in the AL. We'll go through and kind of go up the standings here until I think that's probably just the easiest. You know what I'm saying?
Fair enough. Well, I mean, I'm just saying, just to put them on a wrap on the teams that we consider dead, I would say we've got the White Sox, obviously, and we're just going to go ahead and bury the Marlins and the Rockies. 3 teams which pretty much the Rockies bury themselves all the time. They didn't have much trade activity. But when you talk about the Marlins and the White Sox, these were 2 of the most active teams at the deadline when it comes to shipping players out and bringing, younger talent in and basically hitting the reset button. The White Sox, in their case, some could argue that this has been a few years in the making, just based on the fact that the core that they built aged out, underperformed, stayed injured, whatever happened there. And then there's the Marlins, who I'm pretty sure have been in a rebuild since their last World Series title in 2003.
They're in a constant state of rebuild.
Right. The Marlins have rebuilt and built up championship teams enough times in a lifetime that this is just who the Marlins are. Like the Marlins, this is the standard for them, that every 5 to 7 years they're going to tear all of it down and start over from scratch. White Sox not as used to it. Rockies, again, familiar territory. But those are your dead teams. The teams that are dying, let's move on to those. If we move up the standings, we have on the NL side, we've got the Nationals and the Pirates next, two teams that for sure are dying. They're cruising on their way to being eliminated from contention. It's going to take them a little longer. They probably have another couple of weeks before they're mathematically eliminated. And then jumping over to the American League side, we see the unexpectedness of the Rangers and the Blue Jays, two teams that you spend a lot of time watching and cheering for. You have some level of fandom for each of them. Was not expecting either of them to be in this position this year. Maybe some could say that Blue Jays, may have struggled, but to the tune of 58 wins and 66 losses at this point in the season, I'm so man, the defending champion Rangers. The offense was supposed to be just as mighty as it was last year, if not even better. The pitching looked to get healthy and hopefully flip that around. Neither of those things happened. The offense took a step back. The pitching has stayed hurt. They haven't been able to keep guys in that rotation. And, I'm sure that Rangers fans mostly haven't noticed because, hell, they've been in the World Series hangover. But a disappointing season nonetheless when, you're coming off of your first World Series title and you're expecting to build off of that. I mean, hell, honestly, if the Rangers would have won, it would have been more in the driver's seat for winning the World Series this year. It would have made more sense. They actually kind of finished, it felt like, a year ahead of schedule, winning it all last year. So maybe it's the hangover, maybe it's the injuries, but it's been a dreadful season for the Rangers based on expectations as well.
Yeah, 1,000%. That's the problem. I mean, with Texas, those expectations were there, coming off of a World Series championship where, like you said, you were ahead of schedule. So therefore you think, okay, it's just going to continue to get better. We're going to roll off that. Again, I think this is one to where you look at, the injuries and everything, and you just kind of, I don't want to say you just chalk it up to that, but you kind of have to, because it's not an excuse. It's realistic, as to what's happened. I mean, for example, with the Braves, you can say the same thing. It's just realistically, injuries have just cost a lot of teams. Rangers are one of those. Going into the season, you're looking at, Scherzer was on the IL. You had DeGrom on the IL. You had, what's the former Red that they signed?
Tyler Mahle.
Yeah, Tyler Mahle. Yeah, he's on
just
the IL.
Came back.
Yeah, so it's like halfway through the season, some of these guys were supposed to come back, and by that time, you've already dug yourself a hole. So that situation's pretty tough for Texas. For the Blue Jays, this was just massive underperforming. This is a team that had an absolute ton of talent. They just, nobody seemed to come through outside of Vladdy. Bo's been hurt a lot. The Jays did, they made the conscious effort at the deadline to deal some of their pieces away that were pending free agents, to basically look ahead to next year as, we're going to continue to roll with this, and we're going to, go in at 2025 and with the same group, and hopefully add during free agency, because for the love of God, the money's there. Rogers Sportsnet owns the Blue Jays. So you would think that's going to be, that shouldn't be an issue when it comes to, the influx of money coming in. But, with Toronto, it's a weird situation they're in. But it's just, for these two teams, it's tough. Both teams facing different issues, injuries, and then just underperforming. But yeah, two teams that I'm going to venture to say the plug is not completely pulled on them just yet, but it's definitely headed there though.
Yeah, definitely in the leaning more towards the dying category than anything else. Pickle and Peanut Butter 2566 in the chat mentioning being a Tigers fan. But also going back to our conversation about the Angels, saying that most teams, no matter how good or how bad, have a direction, a plan, a rebuild. The Angels, rudderless. Yeah, that's a team that I'm not really sure. Ron Washington took over there, leaving the Braves to be manager, get back in that manager's chair. But the cupboard was bare. I mean, you have the legendary Mike Trout, who, again, will finish another year on the injured list, as he's done way too many times to count over the second half of his career, which is unfortunate because yet another year robbed of one of the greatest players of our lifetime, seeing him play. But then just the rest of the roster, you look at it in general, outside of Zach Neto and a handful of younger guys, there's this weird, they signed a couple of guys in the offseason to bigger contracts that didn't work out. They got guys that middle of the road guys that they're paying a lot of money, but they shipped. They didn't make a real good attempt to re-sign Ohtani. The Angels, I don't think anybody knows what that franchise is doing. Not Artie Moreno, not the front office, not the fans. Like, the Angels just kind of exist. Pickles and Peanut Butter are also mentioning that think that the Blue Jays need a new GM, which I don't know.
Yes.
Yes, I think the results dictate that there should be a change in the GM chair, but I mean, I don't know. I like the GM situation there that they had. I mean, Shapiro rebuilt or built up Cleveland and everything, and had that name, and maybe it's lost some of that grandeur, and things just haven't worked out in Toronto. So maybe it's just time for a change from that aspect. But I don't know. It just. For Toronto, in Toronto's case, I do feel like it was a collection of very talented players that just failed to live up to their talent. But if Vladdy had done what he's doing now more consistently over the last couple of years, I think we'd be telling a different tale. Like, he's come on in the last 2.5 months, but this is what they needed from him over the last 2 years. And by the time they got it from him, everything had fallen apart. And I don't know where you go if you're Toronto, as far as Bo looks like he's kind of at this crossroads with needing a new contract, but he's been hurt a lot. They're talking about having to move him off short. I don't know what his value is, and I certainly don't know what his value is to Toronto. And then there's Guerrero, who, I mean, I absolutely think that they should re-sign, but he's it. There's not much there besides Vladdy now. I mean, now granted, they do have a whole lot of money. They've got they have a lot of money coming off the books and a lot of money to spend seemingly in this offseason, so they could turn it around relatively quickly. But they play in a tough division against teams that are constantly, reloading and doing all that stuff. I just don't know. Toronto's got a tough road back to relevancy, I feel like.
I don't think so. I think they've got the talents now outside of George Springer. He's older, but you still got Dalton Varsho. You have obviously Vladdy. You've got Bo, and you've got Barrios, pitcher. You got Kevin Gausman. You have Chris Bassett. There's plenty of pieces there. Alejandro Kirk behind the plate. There's plenty of pieces in place, and you have numerous guys who Ricky Tiedemann, their top pitching prospect. Boom, Tommy John. I forget their other prospect they just called up. He got hurt. So it's guys like that. They have the talent there, but we talk about it, in terms of spending the money. The Blue Jays they've got the money. You have to spend that money wisely, and to supplement the solid pieces you have here. They did none of that this offseason. When they say you had the unicorn budget for Ohtani, but then you go out and you don't spend anything, it makes no sense to me. That's the issue. Two things Vladdy's got to be signed. You have to re-sign Vladdy, and you have to re-sign Bo. Those two, I think, are two crucial pieces to this team. If you're able to bring in a shortstop, then you move Bo over to third or second, however you want to finagle it. But you can't sit there and say you have a unicorn budget for one guy, but then don't go out and spend any money after that. That's the problem with the Blue Jays front office. And that's where I'm missing the days of Alex Anthopoulos. You're welcome, Scott, because now you reap the rewards of having AA as your general manager. When Anthopoulos was there, that dude there was not a single guy he was afraid to bring in. There was that time you had Josh Donaldson, you had Edwin Encarnacion, those were the two, big pieces that were brought in. And then, you go out there and you bring in an R.A. Dickey. I forget some of the other guys, that they had brought in because there were so many moves, during that time. It was so much fun to watch the Jays. Those times there is what needs to happen again, because here's the thing. Toronto represents the entire country of Canada. They are it. Everything in Canada funnels to Toronto. So that's why if you see Toronto when they go out on the West Coast trip to Seattle, look what happens. That ballpark, T-Mobile Park, is filled with Jays fans. Why? Because they come down from Vancouver. So, you've got all of that and all that money coming in from Rogers. Like, it's got to be spent. And that's what's so aggravating about this Blue Jays team. And again, this year there was a mix of just injuries, like I said, and underperforming. That happens. It is what it is. And I'm glad the Jays didn't tear it down and completely rebuild, because I think that would have been a huge mistake, because the guys are there and in place that can really, if they take that step back to where they were like last year, this team's going to compete again. But again, you have to bring in other pieces alongside of that to help, take that load off of just Vladdy or Bo. Because like I said, George Springer back, we know when he first signed there, yeah, he could do it. But, you got to take him out of center field, and they did when they had Kevin Kiermaier. So you're taking the pressure off of George Springer. Now you got to take the pressure off of Vladdy and all these other guys. And that's how you do it. You do it in the offseason by either bringing in, via trade or, free agency. And that's where I think Mark Shapiro, they've failed in terms of rebuilding this ball club up to where it should be, because, there's no reason this team should be where they are right now. And literally, right now they're in a battle with the Reds. It's 2-2 in a game that is, around the league, not one that really too many people are going to want to watch. And that shouldn't be the case, because this is two teams that should be competing for a playoff spot, and it's far from it.
Well, and I know that there's been a lot of grumbling up there from fans in Toronto. I know that they're pissed. Matt Barr mentioning that when he was in Anaheim recently, that the Angels fans were pissed, that there's a lot of grumbling. And I've heard that from Angels fans. And there are a lot of fandoms in these cities and franchises that are either starved, in the Angels case, of, having not had really any winning season since they won the World Series in 2002, or very limited success. And then, Toronto, where they've struggled to consistently put out a winner year after year, but definitely are still missing that sustained run of success that they had in the early 90s and the walk-off home run and everything back in 92, 93. That being said, Pickles and Peanut Butter also mentions that, they got to want to go there. So even if Toronto does have the money, you got to keep in mind that they're convinced free agents to come to their team, not as simple as here's money. I do wonder how much Toronto struggles with that. Like they, obviously Shohei turned him down, but I don't know that he was necessarily ever really legit.
He was never going to go there.
Honestly, going to go there. Yeah. But everybody else and other players, like I do wonder like how often they're just immediately snubbed at the negotiating table, because it's like, well, I don't really want to go play in Toronto, for whatever reason it may be.
See, but I have heard that Toronto is such a great city for players, like, and I've heard this on many, like, shows, whether it be, MLB Network Radio or anything like that, where they interview players, and they consistently list Toronto as one of the top cities that they enjoy going to. So I don't think it's that. It's in terms of them turning it down. I think obviously, the money part of it, where Rogers has been frugal with the money that is being dished out.
Yeah.
So, they're being outbid by other teams. It's not the city, because like I said, everything I've heard, and again, I'm not an insider or anything like that, but I've heard it numerous times on other shows that Toronto is one of the top cities that players absolutely love going to and playing. So I just think it's the fact that it's the ownership group and the front office that are the ones holding them back. That's it sucks because, like I said, there's no excuse for it when there is an absolute ton of money to be dished out. They're just not doing it correctly, and that's where before they were able to lure free agents in. So I don't think it's the city part of it. It's just the fact that ownership and front office just aren't doing their job.
That's fair. We've enough time talking about teams that are, I guess, more or less dying at this point in the season, that we should switch gears and move on to the ones that are on life support, which pretty much leaves us with everybody who's staring at the from the outside looking in on the playoff picture. And in the National League, you got just outside of the playoffs, the Mets, the Giants, the Cardinals, the Cubs, and the Reds. They are all just the Braves are 6 games back in the Reds case. They're the furthest back from the Braves in that last playoff spot. But between the Braves, the Diamondbacks, and the Padres for the wild card spots, they're all only separated by just 4 games themselves. So in theory, if any of these teams decided to get their shit together now, the Reds, they're definitely flatlining, quickly. Same goes with the Cubs and the Cardinals to a lesser degree. Like the National League Central is more or less on life support at this point because the Brewers have run away, and there's a very low likelihood that any of the other 3 teams will make a push to be able to get there. In the Giants and Mets case, they've been battling, and funny enough, had just played the Braves in the Giants case. The Braves finished a West Coast swing that took them to San Francisco, and they won 2 out of 3 there, only to go to the aforementioned Angels and lose 2 out of 3 there. So while the Braves may be in the playoff picture at the end of the day, it feels like they're circling the drain, because not only did they lose 2 or 3 in LA, Austin Riley was hit in the hand. He's going to miss 6 to 8 weeks. The injuries continue to pile up for Atlanta. They just get Michael Harris back after being gone for 2 months from a hamstring. This now happens. It's just been one thing after another for the Braves, and it's just every time something happens, I'm like, well, there's still time, and if such and such gets healthy, or this happens, or if nobody else gets hurt, it's going to be okay. They're going to hang in there. I have a hard time wrapping my brain around the fact that even though there's a month and a half left of the season, that this Braves team that has showed very minimal signs of life pretty much since the first couple weeks of April is magically going to flip a switch and things are going to change. There's too many injuries. They've had to substitute too many guys for also there's too much underperformance from the guys that have stayed healthy. It's just been a nightmare scenario for the Braves, and it sucks because it's right in the middle of this window that they have for all these guys being at about that the same age, same abilities as far as like their peaks of their career, and it's just when you waste an entire year like this, it sucks because you can't get it back. There's nothing you can do to recreate anything, any of the scenarios this year. Everything, you just kind of got to turn the page, and now everybody's another year older. And on top of that, you kept Chris Sale healthy for an entire season, and
unbelievable.
That's more or less gone to waste. Like, despite all the injuries, they've done a pretty incredible job being able to trot out anybody to pitch every 5 days. But the fact that one of them has been Chris Sale, who's been basically the pitching version of Mike Trout over the past few years, in that he's always ending the season injured or spending a majority of the season on the injured list. The fact that he's been healthy makes me even more sad that they just have wasted this. and now I know that tomorrow they could just go on this run and make the playoffs and all of this look like, it was all for naught. But it just doesn't feel like that. And there's a certain point in the season and certain things that it just pile up and happen where you just kind of have that feeling, especially as a fan who watches the team a lot. We're just like, this is not their year. It's just things just happen. The baseball gods are are mean when they want to be, and it just so happens to be that this is year. So while they may be still in the playoff picture, they are firmly on life support. Talk about your Reds and what's gone wrong. I know we said that they are basically on death's doorstep, but they're still in there for right now. What's gone wrong with them, and what do they need to fix in order to kind of right the ship, going into next year?
A lot. I mean, it's not just one thing. That's the problem. Is like I said, you look at last year and you think, okay, well, here we are. Again, I was one. I bought into all of the hype from last year. I was so jacked up, picked them to win the division this year. It comes down to the fact that this team just isn't as good as we thought they were. It's, like I said, when you're trotting out guys like Will Benson in the outfield, who is, not like he was last year. Definitely overperformed last year. Jake Fraley, same situation. TJ Friedel, okay. Ellie De La Cruz, you get flashes of absolute brilliance and then flashes of things to where you just go, wow, what are you doing, dude? Noelvi Marte suspended for 80 games. You've got Jonathan India, who consistently, he's there each and every game, and he's gonna bust his ass, and I love that. You had Christian Encarnacion Strand, Matt McClain, two key pieces that we thought were going to be major pieces to this, 2024 team are out, and still nothing from them. Not sure when they're coming back. Or, McClain, we don't know. CES done, obviously, but, the pitching was there. Now it's been, Andrew Abbott's been getting his teeth kicked in. Hunter Green, God only knows what. Yeah, I mean, that we don't know.
Which came out of nowhere.
Yeah, Nick Krall seems pretty confident that he's going to be okay. But, again, it's an elbow. So what if he's not? Do you go into next year? How do you approach that? Nick Lodolo has been off and on. Nick Martinez, what you're going to get from him. He's been solid, solid enough. But other than that, it's just guys that have just overperformed last year, and we guess our expectations were unrealistic, and that's what's happened. And when you got a team with as much young talent as the Reds have, it's just you would expect more. And knowing that knowing the needs that this team had going into the offseason, you go out and you bring in Candelario, okay. But then you bring in the pitching like you did, and I'm okay with that. But you needed more pieces, offensively. And they just did not address those particular pieces. Again, maybe they had thought the same situation that we did, that, hey, this team's going to overperform again, or just perform like they did last year. Obviously, that's not the case. And now we're 6 games out of a wild card spot, and it feels like we're 15 games out. You go and you sweep St. Louis, feeling high and mighty, and then you get absolutely pummeled by Kansas City. The Royals come in, outscore you 28-3. Oof. Just and all 3 of those games were not even remotely competitive. That's the worst part about it. Major home series when the weather was gorgeous. In Cincinnati, it was awesome. You couldn't have asked for better weather against a team like the Royals that have all this young talent. So excited to see them come in, and you play like that, and that's just wow. Again, 3 straight games where you are not even remotely competitive. It's hard to feel even remotely confident at all moving forward in a wild card race where you're 6 games out. Because, like I said, it doesn't feel like that. And then you get the news of Hunter Green on top of that. And Hunter Green has pitched fantastic for this ball club so far.
He turned the corner this year.
He did. And that's, and he's if you look at the way he's played this year compared to, like, his contract, the dude's, like, massively underpaid for, his performance so far. But, again, it seems like it's just one thing after another. And, unfortunately with this team, hopefully they're able to, address it. And I just think, and I mentioned, I want to say last week, talking about David Bell. I like David Bell, but he's not it. I think a change, at the managerial position will go a long way. It's not going to, get you 10 more wins at this point in time. But like I said, I addressed it, a couple shows ago. You're not going to see the stupid stuff on the base paths or anything like that, with a manager that I'm not saying knows what they're doing, but is, I would say a little bit more equipped to, to manage a major league ball club. So at this point, it's pretty tough, here in Cincinnati, but 6 games, like I said, feels a hell of a lot like 15, unfortunately.
Well, moving over to the AL side of things to wrap up the teams that are on life support at this point. Moving down from the top this time, because the name that jumped out at me was Boston. Boston was a team that was left for dead in the offseason. They didn't do anything. They were expected to perform. You want to talk about a fan base that was pissed. That fan base was ready to riot in the offseason because the lack of movement by the front office, everything. Now, they probably are still going to be on the outside looking in, but the fact that they have 65 wins and are only 4 games out, or 3.5 games out of a playoff spot at this point in the season has to be one of the biggest shocks of the year. So, I mean, I feel like if you're a Red Sox fan, even if you're disappointed on the whole with how things have gone, you can't be disappointed with the entire season when you look at it from a expectation standpoint. The team right behind them, though, and we've talked about them both at the beginning of the year as far as a team that we figured was going to be in contention all the way through, and a team at the deadline that made moves that we thought, oh, this is for sure going to take them off, and that's the Seattle Mariners, who are still on the outside looking in, now 5.5 games out of a playoff spot. Moving behind them is Tampa Bay, and then rounding out with Detroit, which would be all the teams that are on life support in the American League. I would say that Detroit is, close to circling the drain as well, but Tampa Bay, the Red Sox, and the Mariners, all different ways of getting to this point of kind of, disappointment. If you're the Rays, had much higher expectations before the season started again. Last year, they were right there, and the Rays, I have no doubt that whatever they do in the offseason, they'll just retool and somehow we'll look up and they'll be back in the conversation. This is just what the Rays do. They build it up and tear it back down faster than pretty much any team in baseball. And
it's amazing.
I was going to say quite astonishingly in most cases, because they never really make huge splashy moves as far as names or players go, but they somehow get the most out of every single player on the roster. So they'll be fine. The Red Sox, again, can't really be too disappointed in the overall, but the Mariners, I know that there's another month and a half, but if for the second year in a row, the team that went out, did all these things in the offseason, try to get better, went out at the deadline, did all these moves to try to get better, and still cannot find a way to fend off the Astros. I mean, you would talk about a fan base that's about ready to riot. I can't imagine what it's like in Seattle to be a fan of them and just feel helpless. Like no matter what we do or what moves we make, and it left the Astros kind of for dead. I mean, the Astros got off to that dreadful start, and had Seattle taken care of business and just run away, they could have left the Astros flailing for a playoff spot. But instead, Astros are firmly in the driver's seat, and here we are wondering, is Seattle going to blow it for the second year in a row and not even get into the playoffs? Like,
it's looking that way.
They might end up being one of the most disappointing teams that's on life support and dies by the end of the season in Seattle.
1,000%, because all that talent is there. And again, we say it each and every single freaking week. They've got the best pitching staff in the American League, if not all of baseball. And they just cannot get over the hump offensively. And that's the crazy part. When you're in a battle with the Houston Astros, who in their last 10 are 9-1, and you go 5-5 in your last 10, well, there's the 4 games that you're down right now to Houston.
Yep.
4 games back in the West, and there it was right there. Like last show, I'm pretty sure they were tied for first place. I'm pretty sure when we did this show last week, they were tied. And now
Yeah,
it's like, what the
I
hell just
think
happened, man?
I was
Like,
just gonna say, I think there might have been, but it doesn't take long to lose ground when you're facing
no.
teams head to head in your division. Like like you get swept, or they play 2 or 3 games better than you in a week when you're playing opposite opponents, and boom, the standings flip, the narrative flips, and then all of a sudden you're flailing if you're a team like the Mariners, to where it's like, oh well, they came out of the All-Star break looking great, came out of the trade deadline, making the most improvements, and here they are like struggling, and the questions are being asked again. Is this offense, do they have enough? Because it
And guess
seems like
what?
the never-ending question.
And now you get to go play the Dodgers in LA. So, I mean, have fun. It's just like, just when it's 2 steps forward, 13 back. And that's the issue that, Seattle's run into all year. And that offense just has not taken that step forward. It sucks because, again, a talent's there, and Trader Jerry's did his job and bringing in the pieces, to help move this team forward, and they're just not getting it done. It sucks. Like you said, they've got to be on the verge of coming absolutely unhinged up there, and it sucks because
well, what's weird to me about the Seattle situation and their struggles to find offense over the last few years is I've heard people talking about, when Teoscar left this past offseason, he said, oh, it's a little hard to see the ball there and can't see it that great. His numbers suggest that when he played there, they weren't that great. I don't ever remember there being such offensive struggles in the early 2000s when those Mariners with Ichiro and those guys, when they were setting that record back in 2001.
Yeah.
I don't remember there ever being an issue with that being an offensive, a place where offense goes to die. So I don't understand why the collection of guys that they've put together and put on the field over the last couple of years just have struggled, no matter like whether or not they've been brought in from other teams or what. It's just been this weird, like offensive Bermuda Triangle, I guess, or just everything just goes there to die.
Yeah, and that's the surprising part because when you have all that offensive talent that we thought they did to match up with that pitching staff, and again, it just literally it's out of nowhere, like you said, the offensive Bermuda Triangle. What happened? I mean, what in the hell has happened up there? Because, man, again, now, like you said, we go from last week to this week, blink of an eye, you're 4 games back, 5.5 out on the wild card. Ooh, they're definitely circling that drain, and they're circling it really fast. Like I said, now you've got 3 games with the Dodgers. That ain't gonna help your cause.
So let's each pick a team that we think on the outside looking in, either National League or American League. Any of the teams that we've discussed here this evening, do you think that any of them, outside of the Braves, who are in the playoffs right now, if everything ended today, is there another team on either side that you think is going to make a run over the next month and a half and sneak their way in? Or hell, in the Mariners' case, it wouldn't even be sneaking their way in; it'd just be getting in because that was what the expectations were in general. But yeah, is there a team that you can look and say, all right, they have a good shot to turn things around?
I want to say Seattle because they've got the pitching.
Yes,
and pitching goes a long, long way. I mean,
in theory, they're only 3 games back in the division. So there's that. I mean, they're 5.5 back in the wild card, but they're only three games back in their division. So it's not impossible.
I know it's not. I mean, I'm going through here, and you scroll, and it's like, oh man, the farther you go down, it's like.
I was going to say it gets ugly in a hurry once you scroll past the top couple of teams.
I don't have the faith in Boston because the division they're in. The East is, I mean, Baltimore and New York are, they're on fire right now. I'm going to go Seattle. I am. I just, damn it, I want them. It's probably because I'm like, it's, It's hopeless, but I'm gonna go with it. I'm gonna go with it. I'm gonna roll. I'm gonna roll with it because they can, like I said, with that pitching staff. Surely to God, the offense is going to come around. You'd have to think so. It's one of those situations like you see the names listed in that, on the lineup card each and every game, and you're like, okay, they're going to do well. Okay, they're going to do well, and they don't. It's like, what the hell? But Seattle. I'm going Seattle.
This pains me to say this.
I know what you're going to say.
But when I look at it, if Atlanta, if this is indeed their last stand and the way they've played over the last couple of weeks, it appears that it is. By God, the damn Mets are going to somehow backdoor their way into the playoffs, aren't they?
You know what?
That is the one team that I look at and I'm saying, like, and I've kind of been eyeing them, keeping an eye on them since earlier in June when they kind of started playing a little bit better and moving. Like, I hate to say it, but I could definitely see the Mets finishing this thing off and edging the Braves out of the playoffs by like a game or two. Because if Atlanta doesn't get their shit together, the Mets have been playing just good enough to sneak in there. And I know that they have at least one more head-to-head matchup between now and the end of the season. Braves start their last gasp effort at keeping their division title hopes alive when they start a series of Philadelphia tomorrow. But again, I think that's that there's a fat chance, there's a greater chance of me being 6-4 tomorrow than them holding on to this division title run. And I think there's an even better chance of me being 6-4 than there is of the Braves screwing this up altogether and the Mets sneaking in. So I'm gonna go Mets as much as it pains me to say it.
If it makes you feel better, that's what I was gonna pick. But because I care and I didn't want to send you to the roof, I didn't go that route. So yeah, I was leaning that way. I know. That's what I was like.
Mike pointing out that you were waffling on the question, like somebody said, if you don't get it right, you have to take a kick to the crotch. And Matt, I knew he was watching, and him being a Mets fan, he enjoys hearing the words come out of my mouth that the Mets are the ones to pick. But I do. I mean, I think that the Mets have played really good in the second half. They still haven't played up to the talent level as far as the contracts they're paying and all that. But at the end of the day, they've played well enough to be in this position, and I think they have just enough that they could edge the Braves out. And wouldn't that be wild after everything that's gone on this season that they end up in the playoffs? And then all bets are off because I know the Mets were supposed to get back some pitching that would make the road a little bit easier, and things kind of haven't worked out there. But the Mets are the kind of team that I wouldn't want to see in the playoffs because they'll have absolutely no expectations on them.
And that's the thing.
And to get matched up against a team like the Brewers in the first round, you're playing with house money. And I don't think that the Brewers are that great of a team.
No, I agree. But I was gonna, going back to the Braves, I think this is more of a damning indictment on the Braves than it is on the Mets, though.
Thank you. It is. It
absolutely seriousness. I mean, because
I agree. I mean, it hurts.
I ain't got a dog in that fight, so I could give a shit. So
yeah, no, the Mets should have been buried months ago.
Exactly. So this is more of, like I said, an indictment on the Braves not being able to, or it's not even really their fault in terms of like the injuries. It's just like you said, you guys somehow pissed off the baseball gods, and They are, I mean, just slam dancing you guys like crazy. So with that being the case, that is more of, the fact that you're still there, you're still in it while the Mets just haven't been able to get over that hump when, you would think it should have been taken care of a while ago based off of where we've seen the Braves really throughout this entire year. Like I said, those injuries have mounted up right from, Jump Street, it seems like, and then nobody's been able to take advantage of it outside the Phillies, So, but in this case, I'm going to say this is more on the Braves than it is on the Mets being able to overtake them. Because if they do, it's going to be because the Braves are just completely, I mean, it's a mash unit, and unfortunately, it is what it is when you're dealing with situations like that. So.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, by God, just hold off the Mets. Like if they can get in, it would just be the icing on the shit show that this season has been to lose the playoff spot to the Mets. I mean, it's one thing to lose the division to the Phillies, and that eventually the division title run was going to come to an end, and that's fine. I'm okay with that. I don't care about division titles. I want to win championships, and that's fine. You come into this year even kind of expecting that Philadelphia might finally get over that hump. But it was never in the cards to miss out on the playoffs and to do so because of the Mets. So if that comes to fruition, it's going to be a long off season for them. A very long off season because that's going to be tough to stomach.
Yeah, that'll suck. That'll suck. I feel you. Oh man, that'll suck.
I will not be happy. But let's move on to the other big news story of the week when it comes to baseball, and we are divided. We are house divided when it comes to this one. So if you haven't heard, there's been rumors out there that Major League Baseball is playing with the idea of making a rule so that starters have to go 6 innings minimum in baseball. I am not on board with this at all. The caveats to the rule would be the fact that the pitcher would, if he throws 100 pitches, could come out before that 6 inning mark. If he gives up more than 4 runs in the start, he could be lifted. Or if he gets injured and the injury has to have a corresponding injured list stint so that, a team like the Mets who've been busted by it before can't fake injured list, oh, guy's sucking, and all of a sudden he's got a blister. Oh, guy's sucking, all of a sudden, is something wrong with his elbows tingling. So they pull him out to skirt the rule. I absolutely hate the idea. And here's why. I understand what Major League Baseball is trying to do. And you and I probably agree with what the goal is here. We want to see starters pitch longer in games.
Yes.
Nobody wants to see starters go 4 innings, 5 innings, tapping out at 6. I don't know how many times I see guys go 5 2/3. 6 innings feels like a complete game for starters these days. And that's insane. Like the idea that we've gone from the days of guys coming in and like a complete game being the expectation to, Christopher Sanchez threw a 9-inning, 99-pitch shutout for the Phillies the other night. And that's a rarity. It's a shock when I actually had to do a double take when I saw the 9 next to the innings pitched for Christopher Sanchez. And that's sad. Like, that's not baseball. That's not how baseball should be. Like, I miss the days of guys demanding to finish games that they started, wanting to go out there. And I understand that players now are taught at the minor league level, go out there, give us max effort, give us everything you got for as long as you get. We'll take whatever that is. If it means you strike out 10 guys and we pull you in 4 innings, then so be it. We'll figure it out. But to me, that's not baseball. To me, that's not how starting pitching is supposed to be in baseball. Starters are supposed to go until they can't go anymore, and that presumably would be 8th or 9th inning on more occasions than not. And I get it, not everybody has the skill level to get through 9. Not everybody has the physical ability to get through 9. But once upon a time, not that long ago, there was a reasonable expectation that you guys would at least go 7 innings. The setup guy coming out in the 8th and then the closer for the 9th, it was reasonable. We could deal with that. But this whole 5-inning thing has gotten out of hand, and it's getting closer to, all games being bullpen games than not. But I'm going to stop you there when it comes to making a rule that these guys have to, because baseball, I wasn't a fan of the universal DH. Fine. It happened. Whatever. You get you more offense. I struggle with that because it took strategy out of the game. I know it's made the game better, more watchable for the casual fan, whatever. Fine. You legislate shifting out of the game. I know, again, that you're trying to increase offense, blah, 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 blah. But what you did was take another strategy away from the game. another dynamic that, each team should be able to employ their players however they can to stop the opposing team from scoring within the rules. The idea that you would make a rule to stop a actual strategy in the game from happening is absurd to me. And this is one more thing. Like, no, I don't like starters not going, 9 innings if they can. But I don't want anybody to say, well, this guy has to keep going because of some arbitrary number, arbitrary set of rules. I mean, I want guys to go that long because of merit, not because the rule says they have to go to. And I have a feeling that this isn't going to create necessarily the desired outcome, because what's to stop guys from, you get to that certain point and things aren't going to. What if you're at 90 pitches going into the 6th inning, right? And you're supposed to 10 more pitches. Well, what's to stop a guy from coming out there and, oh my God, he's lost his control. And he all of a sudden he went to 7 pitches on that guy, threw some balls, and next thing you know, he's out. Then we're slowing the game and getting down again for pitching changes and all that. Like, I just don't think that the rule change is going to have the desired outcome that they think it is. Where do you stand on this whole thing?
Well, I don't think that we made it sound like we were going to disagree a lot more. And I don't think that's the case. What it comes down to is pitchers don't know how to pitch nowadays. That shift from learning how to pitch to now just straight pumping velocity, and that's it. We've gone from, the days of a Greg Maddux 89 pitch complete game to, guys throwing 104 miles an hour for 4 innings, and that's it. That's all they can do. It's the guys have to learn to pitch. You have to learn how to control the strike zone, change speeds, change eye level, everything like that. That is what has to happen. Because nowadays, these pitchers, it doesn't matter how hard you throw. These guys, and the saying, I've heard it before, and it's amazing. These guys can time up a fighter jet. That's how good these hitters are. So, yeah, just because, you throw it, 104, but you got, you're a 2-pitch pitcher, like Hunter Green, for example. Hunter Green was a 2-pitch pitcher for a long time, and it was getting rocked on his fastball because he had nothing else. So that's where these guys, you have to learn to pitch. If you learn to pitch, you're going to go longer in games. So I don't think I like the 6-inning rule, like I said, in terms of and you can't enforce it. That's the problem is,
right.
And that's, a starter should go more than 6 innings. And it's like, to me, if you don't go more than 6 innings, you're not a starter. Like, that's, again, and like you said, you're shifting more to a bullpen game each and every night. And that's not, to me, that's not baseball. I want to see guys, throwing 100+ pitches every night, that they're on the mound, and go from there. And that's what, 6 to 7 innings? Okay, good. You get past that 6-inning mark and go from there. But again, that's that shift of the metrics part of it that, all these numbers and everything like that they've ruined the game of baseball in some aspects when, some teams, like for example, I have heard from people in the game that, as they were coming up through an organization that, you're graded on a certain level and you wouldn't even be remotely looked at if you didn't throw 96 or above. Well, I'm sorry, but you look at a guy like, for example, like Brent Suter of the Reds, he doesn't pitch like that. But what does he do? He works the corners, changes eye level, everything like that. That's how you pitch. And that is what we have gone away from in baseball. And that's why we're seeing a lot of these injuries, the spin rates and everything like that. It's ridiculous. It is a change in philosophy of just trying to throw hard and get the most break possible instead of knowing how to pitch. And I think that is the issue we're seeing. And as soon as you start to kind of switch back to that, you're going to go back to seeing pitchers go 6, easily above 6 innings, 7, 8 innings. it's just that's how it is. But it's just that again, it's been that fundamental change in the game to where you got to throw triple digits, otherwise you're not even getting a sniff at the league. When there's other guys that know how to get it done other ways, and they're not even getting looked at. And I think that's the issue we're running into. I like the rule in terms of, you should be at least able to go 6, but again, you can't enforce it. And some of the other rules, some of the other caveats in that are stupid. So it's just it's dumb. But like I said, we both agree on the fact, of what we want to see from the game. It's just I think the implementation of it is ridiculous.
Yeah, and Mike's always the voice of reason when it comes to stuff like this, and he's probably right. But this is one of those ones that raised my eyebrow more so than some of the others, because some of the others it's like, well, that doesn't sound like anything that's necessarily really feasible. But this one does, and he said that this is 100% of the league throwing out a horrible idea to use as a chip in the next collective bargaining. The union will be against this, and the owners will use it against them to drop something else. And the owners have done this more times than we can count, and they constantly end up with the upper hand in negotiations. And because the commissioner can unilaterally do things after like the 1 year grace period or whatever, you throw something like this out there to see the reception, and if it doesn't go great, then like you said, use a negotiation tactic. And if it does come to the point where you just implement it on your own, like, there's nothing that the players can do. But again, I don't know that doing this is necessarily the avenue that like they ultimately want to go. Like, it just, I don't think it makes sense when you like start thinking it through about how it'll work. And like, you can't tell me that you've got all these pitchers on the staff, and in theory, the way the game has always been played, on any given night, you have your entire pitching staff available, right? Like it's funny because in the playoffs are like most of our lives, the playoffs were actually played like baseball is played now. Like the regular season is played now, where guys in the playoffs would go max effort and you'd only see him. And you didn't bat an eye because, you'd look up and it'd be like, well, these guys are, in the playoffs, you get 5-6 innings or you get to that magical third time through the order, whatever marker that the teams used in the playoffs, the hook and the leash is much shorter. But then that stuff started rolling into the regular season, and that's become now just how the game's played. I don't know that you can put the genie back in the bottle. Like, I don't know that you can go. And I don't like the idea of having an entire pitching staff at your disposal on every given night. That's not how baseball works, to where you would be using every single pitcher. But that's part of the game, right? Like, in theory, you could even put every single player on the roster into pitch on any given night if you want. Like, I don't like the idea that because something's gone way too far in a direction that that the game never intended. And look, this change took a course of 150 years baseball's been played now. So it didn't come to this overnight. It wasn't just this is the evolution of the game, and it's not where anybody wants it to have gone, but these things kind of come and go, right? Like, I know that there aren't teams that are looking at guys throwing in the mid 90s, but what if it goes, or the lower 90s? But what if it goes back to that? Like, what if somehow there's a team that says, well, these guys don't, they still know how to pitch, and they go like, I guess you can look at the Cardinals. The Cardinals kind of go that route. It doesn't really fucking work. I don't know, man. I don't know what the ultimate like way to get teams to do it is, but I don't like the idea of legislating and forcing them to do it. I just think it's a bad idea. And then you got to start making up rules for everything. Like, people didn't like how much closers are being used, and the closer usage changed. Like, these things have a way of kind of changing on their own. I don't know. It just, baseball needs to stay away from this one as far as putting in a rule to enforce it.
It's just the evolution of the game. That's all it is. And like you said, it's when it comes to the the pitching part of it, like learning how to pitch. Again, that was just a shift in the game. That's all it is. So, like you said, the genie's out of the bottle. You can't get that back unless the only way it changes is teams again start to like, oh, hey, I don't need a guy who is throwing 99. I'll take the guy who's throwing 93, 94, good movement, a lot of sink, everything like that. And then like, hey, okay, that worked. And then that continues to, evolve. You start to see more and more of those pitchers. And then the game shifts back to that type of pitching. Then you're going to see that more and more often. Right now, it's just a natural progression and evolution of the game. Is all it is. And at this point, it's just, we're at a time now to where, baseball, you can't really do too much. And you should probably sit this one out. It's really what it comes down to. But like Mike said, unfortunately, I think I'm in the same, mentality on that one. That's 100% what it is. And again, they just got to leave it alone.
Yeah, Mike taking my idea and saying that he thinks a better idea for a rule change would be that you have to throw every pitcher on your roster every day. I mean, that would get interesting real quickly.
Yeah,
I don't know about going that route, but I don't know. They've implemented so many rule changes over the last 10 to 15 years, and drastic changes in the pitch clock and all that. And I've been on board with most of the stuff, and it's made the game better in a lot of ways. It's just at some point it has to stop, and you've got to let the game do what the game is going to do. And people, I see it's just like, well, they got to get. I'm to the point where people are either going to watch baseball or they're not. I mean, you either enjoy baseball or you don't. And again, it's kind of like, with other things, it's like evolution. Once upon a time, baseball was the most popular sport. It fell out of favor there. I mean, it's now, third, if you're just talking about eyeball metrics behind basketball and football. It just is what it is. Like, I don't necessarily think you're going to be able to make a rule. Like, is anybody who stopped watching baseball over the past 20 years or so going to say, "Oh, that's what I always wanted"? They're making starters go longer in games. They put a 6-inning limit on it, or a minimum on it. Now I'll watch baseball. Like, no, that's not going to happen. That's not why casual fans tune into the games anyway. So all you're doing is, really pissing off your main base, because
exactly
for the most part, this seems to be like baseball fans aren't a huge favorite. Like, same thing. We all want the same result, but there's got to be a better way to do it. So,
yep,
it is what it is. But Rexamillion suggesting that a shorter season might be better. And look, as much of a baseball fan as I am and will always be, I have advocated for a shorter season for a long time now. I think that the Major League Baseball season should begin in April, and the regular season should end when football is starting. And I know you don't want to pander to other sports and all that, but they do that shit all the time with scheduling. So why not have the regular season end at the end of August and the playoffs be starting when football is getting back in, everybody's all hyped up, and it's the start of the season? What better way to make baseball, put baseball, the brightest light of baseball, than to have your playoffs and your championship game going on the first month that football's back in session? Again, I don't think that you're going to compete with it on a 1-for-1 just because of that, but it would make it more watchable than, oh, it's September in baseball. There's still another month left. And for most teams in the league, they're meaningless games. Like, I mean, they just are. I mean, the White Sox are playing for nothing for the next month and a half.
They've been playing meaningless games for the last 2 months.
Right. And in a couple of weeks, half the league is going to join them. So why have that going on for an extra month? Just start the playoffs in September, man. Like, I just
agreed.
I think shortening the game or shortening the season by, what would that be, like 30 games? It's not going to kill. And I know that'll never happen because of revenue and all that other shit. And the owners certainly aren't going to give more back. But I mean that might be a way to help with the fatigue of pitchers and how long they're going. So, I guess it's audible on my end that the kids are getting yelled at because Matt wants to know which kid is getting an ass whooping this time. I don't think either one an ass whooping just yet. I know if there's something funny in the comment section because while I'm talking, because I watch you just immediately start laughing. I'm like,
I saw that. I was like, oh shit. It's either
baseball. I don't think that ultimately this ends up happening, and Mike's probably right. It's probably a big time negotiating tactic and a scare thing, and just to kind of float it out there and see what the perception of it is, both public and with the players, and then they'll go from there. But I think there's a way to get to where we want to go, but it's not through a rule change. Not like this.
Exactly. So. Completely agree. Yep. Completely agree.
I mean, and baseball needs to just leave alone for just a little bit. Like we've had enough rule changes in the last couple of years that they need things to kind of settle before they you've changed everything so quickly and so drastically without seeing how things play out. There's all sorts of variables that can pop up that you're not even aware of. Like
they can't help themselves. That's the problem.
I know. Then they've started tinkering, and now they can't undo it.
Oh yeah, yep. It's a damn shame. Again, just let it go, let it breathe, and go from there. But they just cannot help themselves. They simply can't do it.
Well, like I said, I maintain that either you watch baseball and you enjoy it, or or you don't, and you probably were never going to. Like there's no amount of nitpicking with the amount of innings that a starter has to go, or amount of pitches he has to pitch that's going to change anybody's mind who doesn't watch the game. So
to me, they're catering to the wrong group. That's really what it comes down to.
Which is what baseball seems to do more often than not recently with these things, is they want to make these big sweeping changes. And I get it. You're trying to make it more appealing, but in the process of making it more appealing to a wider audience, they end up alienating the fans that I guess they're not worried about losing us because we'll watch baseball no matter what. But I can tell you that if it starts to go the route of the NFL, that my entertainment level / excitement level for the NFL has steadily gone down over the past 20 years. And it's directly tied to the rule changes. I do not enjoy football the way that it is played in the NFL now, because it's all geared towards offense. And they said, fans don't want to see defense. Fans don't want to watch teams play defense. And that couldn't be anything further from the truth. I miss hard-hitting linebackers, safeties flying over the middle. And I know, some of that has to do with safety, and I get all that too. But the idea that you can't touch the quarterback, or you hit guys too hard that it's a foul, and it lost its appeal for me. And maybe the NFL doesn't give a shit because so many they're lining their pockets every minute of the day with money from fans that are more than happy to feed into it. But it's just not me. And I would hate for baseball to start to lose my fandom, and when it's stayed at a very high level through everything that it's gone through over my lifetime. I'd hate to see it go the way of football and just start to appeal to me less because they started meddling with the basic foundation of the game and the rules.
Yep. And that's where they're headed, because again, they're catering to the wrong group. And, you continue to do that, it ruins it. And it's a shame because, again, baseball is the best game that's played. It's awesome. But
it is,
and that's, we talk about every time. I mean, even when we're watching our kids, gong show every season, we're looking at each other like, man, what the hell's going on here? But it's like, man, they're enjoying the game of baseball. They're having fun. And it's like, yeah, damn it, that's the way it should be. But then you look at, what Major League Baseball is doing. It's like, man, what the hell? I mean, I can't imagine some of these rules being, in place in our kids' games, like it's just,
Yeah, like I can't imagine the rules like this filtering down to the lower levels. Like I know that it won't be a 1-to-1, but everything filters down from the pros for all sports in some way, shape, or form. It may not take hold all the way. It may be modified. But somehow, some way, there will be something that's affected on the youth level because they decided to change a rule at the major league level. Because eventually, there's going to be coaches or leagues or whatever that's like, well, this prepares you for, the majors. So why don't you come here? And then it's just going to become the norm for everybody else. So
exactly.
Well,
it's crazy.
Hopefully they come to the right conclusion on this one. I hope that it's just a bargaining chip, to be quite honest with you. Like, let the players get fooled out of something else, because that seems to be their MO in negotiations. Because if I was part of the players union or one of the player reps, if I was Tony Clark, I'd get shit done. They constantly concede way too much on things like this.
Yep.
Too worried about the short term and not about the long term. So hopefully they make the right choice on this one and don't give up something else bigger in the process.
They will, because
it's baseball and baseball players.
Exactly, yeah. Because why not,
Well, speaking of why not, it's a perfect spot to end it.
Why not?
I've got nothing else. Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
I've got nothing else for this week. The Braves. They're trying to change the game. Like, just leave it. Just leave it alone. Let my players get injured when pitchers don't have any restrictions on them. Okay?
Yes. Agreed. Agreed.
Well, for Chris, I'm Scott, and that's going to do it for us this week. Thank you guys for tuning in for another episode of the Backwards A Baseball Show. We are here every Monday. We can be, or as often as our children's schedules allow us. But you can find us on Facebook, on Twitter, on the Impact Sports Cincinnati Network, and of course, the Craft Brew Sports Podcast Network. We do this because we love it. We appreciate you guys joining along with us. Share it with a friend. Give us a review. 5 stars, help us out. Do whatever you can. Spread the word, because baseball needs to be talked about more, as much as we love doing it. Thank you guys for joining us. We appreciate you. Have a good night.